Social Death, Part 1. The death of God proclaimed by the philosopher Nietzsche in the 19th century is relevant to the conditions of socialization in modern times. The increasing multiplicity of meanings in our culture is a resultant of a fundamental process of Western civilization, namely radical de-Christianization. Since the end of the 19th century, Western culture has lost the ability to order social life in relation to some metaphysical center. Despite the loss of faith in the Christian God, modern man retains Christian values. After the death of God, is Western culture on its way to producing new values that would also fuse collective life into a single society? By the end of the 19th century, life itself had become the only point of reference. The death of God would mean, from this point of view, the complete liberation of life from the power of metaphysical concepts. This is a trend that only reached its peak in the second half of the 20th century. With the death of God, what has hitherto been called society also dies. Are we therefore ceasing to live in society today? With a departure from metaphysics as a principle of collective life, we will be forced to look at our collective life differently in Western culture. Culture, of course, continues to make its presence felt in the creation of social regimes, works of art, religion, scientific achievements, and so on. However, the power of these systems no longer lies in the fact that they provide ideological models for life. To live in culture is to turn to ideas which, by giving life content, order human existence. This formal order appears to be fundamental and unchanging. The higher the level of cultural development, the more the tendency of the progressive complication of life intensifies. Eventually, the individual literally loses himself. The first culture we know that fully experienced the loss of man in the multiplicity of meanings was the ancient Greco-Roman culture. Eventually, there had to be a fundamental question of the meaning of the whole in that culture. For this reason, Christianity was able to bring a sense of fulfillment and security to ancient civilization. Until the second half of the 19th century, directing people towards truth in the form of a single supreme idea remained the legacy of Christianity in Western culture. Contemporary Western culture seems to be returning to the differentiated model of collective life of the pre-Christian period. People do not usually integrate themselves into society by way of reflection, but spontaneously without thinking offer everything they are and do to communities that are important to them. One, to his church or God; another, to his family; a third, to his homeland or party. Social Death, Part 2. The historian Foucault concluded that it would be possible to look at collective life from a different perspective. He proposed to look at society as an immoral and endless order battle. In his view, not only is the very genesis of the social order violent, but also its everyday functioning refers to an image of perpetual war. The law is not pacification, because inside all, even the most regular mechanisms of power, war still rages. Civilization was only a superficial shell covering up the fact that the entire socio-cultural order constitutes a battle order. Foucault consistently stated that it is politics that is the war waged by other means. According to Foucault, collective life is always a battlefield. There begins to be a collective awareness that certain fundamental differences cannot be reconciled through public debate. We are a diverse collection of individuals and institutions without a single center or a single normative system. We have battles of different lifestyles, morals, customs, and even truths, over which no authority capable of pacifying this battle can now prevail. After the death of God as a unifying force, society also dies, becoming a formless and uncontrollable and utterly unpredictable entity. How, then, to define contemporary collective life? It turns out that in the words death of God lies the epochal decentralization of Western culture. Western culture is not only struggling with the effects of de-Christianization and the slow detachment of centuries of attachment to Christian traditions. Western culture has proved incapable of generating new ideas from which any permanent order would emerge. Thus, Western culture ceased to be culture in the normative sense of the word, as it ceased to form and shape human life in a permanent way. On the contrary, the chaotic rush of life produces temporary creations which, however, do not have the power to regulate collective life. In fact, they are interchangeable. Collective life turns out to be what it has always been, a battle order. We can only oppose this immoral state of affairs by means of civilizing social conflict. The difference will not be in the choice between war and peace. The difference can only be in the choice of the means of war. We can choose the means of argument or discussion, fight or talk. But all romantic attempts at top-down pacification of the order of battle will end in failure. That much history has taught us. Truth cannot break through and become the only truth in force. Even this real truth is nowadays powerless on a holistic level.
Conclusion. But Jesus, overhearing what was being said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid, only believe." Bible, Mark 5 verse 36. It will still be beautiful, despite everything. Just put on comfortable shoes, because you have your whole life to go through. John Paul II. Mathematics in nature.